Good evening. I'm Rhonda at Carnivore Leo, bringing you news you can use from the community. Before I begin with tonight's topic, I want to share a short testimony. My hubby was hired to do a photo shoot for a wedding this past Saturday, and I was pleasantly surprised to meet another carnivore. Her name is Gabby, and she's 21 years old. And how I found out that she was carnivore was because my husband was talking to her parents about our carnivore way of eating. And her parents immediately said, "Well, our daughter Gabby eats this way." And so I couldn't wait to meet her. And when I met her, I told her how blessed she was to have started the carnivore diet at such a young age, and how I wished I had started or had found out about the carnivore diet when I was her age. So it was really a nice surprise to meet another carnivore in my community. And additionally, the wedding officiant, her name is Sue, she was um, present when I was talking to Gabby about the carnivore diet, and she had was intrigued as she was asking me questions about it. And so um, we exchanged numbers, and I gave her my YouTube information and provided Dr. Anthony Chafee's and Dr. Ken Berry's YouTube videos on how to get started on the carnivore diet. She had told me that she wanted to start the carnivore diet as soon as possible. And she replied um, to my text message, and she said that it was truly a joy and pleasure meeting you and your sweet husband. I will be spending my morning checking out your YouTube channel and each of the doctor's videos and making my grocery list for the week. So excited to see and feel the new me. This was such an unexpected surprise, and I feel so blessed to be able to inspire others to the proper human diet. So, with that said, let's get on with the news you can use. Tonight's topic is about carnivore mythbusters, separating fact from fiction. The carnivore diet has emerged as both a beneficial diet and lifestyle intervention and a focus of contention. Enthusiasts praise its simplicity and power to overcome seemingly intractable ailments, while skeptics worry about the effects of cutting out the plant foods we've been told are healthy and increasing the animal products we've been told are bad for us. With such a radical departure from the mainstream nutritional narrative, myths and misconceptions can cloud the true essence of the carnivore diet. So let's separate fact from fiction as we debunk common carnivore diet myths and shed light on the science behind this ancestral eating regimen. Myth number one: the carnivore diet is nutritionally deficient. The myth that cutting out plant foods and consuming only animal products causes nutrient deficiencies is alarmingly prevalent and disturbingly wrong. You can only believe it if you've been grossly misled about both the unsurpassed abundance of nutrients in meat and the inadequate nutrients in most plant foods. Animal products, including red meat, seafood, organ meats, and full-fat dairy, are the most nutrient-dense foods on earth. Animal products provide essentially every macro and micronutrients you need to thrive in near perfect proportions and in their most bioavailable forms. In fact, there are numerous essential nutrients that are found only in meat. The same cannot be said for plant foods. Despite the balanced diet dogma, from a nutritional perspective, plants are completely non essential. Animal-based foods provide so much more than the fat and protein that most people think of. Myth number 2, eating meat is bad for your heart. As a source of saturated fat, animal products have been victimized by a false association between saturated fat and heart disease. To undo this myth, we need not look any further than the most recent and highest quality mainstream studies. Let's begin with the fact that there are no randomized controlled trials linking the consumption of fresh meat with heart disease. A bellwether 2020 systemic review, the gold standard of nutritional research, published in the prestigious Journal of the American College of Cardiology, concluded, quote, although intake of processed meat has been associated with increased risk of coronary heart disease, intake of unprocessed red meat is not, which indicates that the saturated fat content of meat is unlikely to be responsible for this association. The researchers affirm that animal products, including whole fat, dairy, and processed meat, are saturated fatty acid-rich foods with a complex matrix of nutrients that are not associated with increased risk of coronary vascular disease. The totality of available evidence does not support further limiting the intake of such foods, end quote. Another systemic review from 2015 analyzed data from 15 randomized controlled trials that included over 59,000 participants. Researchers found that reducing saturated fat had no impact on heart attacks, strokes, and all-cause mortality. A 2010 meta-analysis of 21 studies with nearly 350,000 participants and a follow-up period of 5 to 23 years yielded similar results. The study authors stated, quote, there is no significant evidence for concluding that dietary saturated fat is associated with increased risk of coronary heart disease or coronary vascular disease. More data are needed to elucidate, which means to explain, expound, or interpret, whether coronary vascular disease risks are likely to be influenced by the specific nutrients used to replace saturated fat. By specific nutrients, quote unquote, the authors are referring to sugar and partially unsaturated seed vegetable oils. Numerous studies implicate these plant foods as key factors in heart disease. Myth number 3, eating red meat causes cancer. One of the most pernicious or harmful myths about the carnivore diet is that eating so much red meat will cause cancer. But as with heart disease, the link between fresh meat and cancer is baloney. Let's follow the science. A 2015 analysis found that red meat had no relationship with colon cancer, even when including consideration of cooking methods and other mitigating factors. This is significant because some forms of cooking, such as grilling, can produce compounds thought to be carcinogenic. But in this study, even grilled meat didn't affect cancer risk. A 2011 meta-analysis of 25 studies found insufficient evidence to support an association between red meat and colon cancer, the most common cancer attributed to eating red meat. A major 2019 review of 73 other studies concluded, quote, the possible absolute effects of red and processed meat consumption on cancer mortality and incidents are very small, and the certainty of the evidence is low to very low. An interesting 2018 study found that there was no difference in the rates of colorectal cancer between vegetarians and people who consumed red meat. Myth number 4: the carnivore diet is bad for the environment. Perhaps the most strident or harsh myth about the carnivore diet is that eating lots of meat is bad for the environment. But the reality is that the impacts of animal livestock on the environment are in many cases remarkably misrepresented. Let's take, for example, the purported greenhouse effects of methane produced by cattle. UC Davis researcher Frank Mitloehner explains that methane from cows ought to be analyzed differently than the greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere through burning fuels that have been unlocked from the earth. Methane from cows is part of a natural carbon cycle. Cows eat grass, a form of carbon. Bacteria in the cow's stomach ferments the grass. Methane is expelled as a byproduct of cow digestion. After 10 years in the atmosphere, the methane produced by cows breaks back down into water and carbon dioxide. These elements are returned to the earth through photosynthesis. Then cows eat the grass and the closed system cycles on. Even though methane from fossil fuels and living organisms like cows are chemically identical, they have a different warming impact. Carnivore dieters who are concerned about their impact on the environment can select meat raised with regenerative agricultural practices and carbon farming. These ranching methods actually pull carbon out of the atmosphere and sequester it into the soils, improving soil health. But even conventional animal agriculture is not the menace to the environment that it's made out to be. An International Atomic Energy Agency report revealed that until 2003, it incorrectly believed increasing livestock numbers were associated with increasing atmosphere methane levels, when in fact there was no relationship between increasing populations of ruminant animals and changes in atmospheric methane. Likewise, a 2018 NASA report found that atmospheric methane has risen sharply since 2006. However, this increase was attributable to emissions from oil and gas production and microbial production in rice paddies and marshes, but not from livestock. Myth number 5: the carnivore diet doesn't have enough fiber. Fiber is a type of indigestible carbohydrate found in plant foods. Meat doesn't have fiber, making the carnivore diet an essentially no-fiber diet. This scared people who think of fiber as a kind of pipe cleaner without which they won't poop. But this is a misconception. Ironically, many people report using the carnivore diet to successfully overcome digestive issues like irritable bowel syndrome, in large part due to the elimination of fiber. Not surprisingly, research shows that the more fiber people eat, the greater the risk of developing diverticular diseases. A study published in the World Journal of Gastroenterology analyzed data from all the studies over the previous 35 years, investigating the link between fiber and colon health. The authors concluded, quote, "A strong case cannot be made for a protective effect of dietary fiber against colorectal polyp or cancer." Neither has fiber been found to be useful in chronic constipation and irritable bowel syndrome. It is also not useful in the treatment of perianal conditions. Though fiber has been shown to reduce cholesterol and control blood sugar, neither of these effects is necessary for most people participating or practicing a carnivore diet. For one, cholesterol is not a good measure of heart disease risk, and two, blood sugar control is not an issue on a very, very low carb diet. Myth number 6, the carnivore diet is just too expensive. Meat isn't cheap, but neither is junk food. In fact, the real myth is that people eat processed food because it's cheap. The reality is that people eat processed food because it is engineered to be addictive and it's prepackaged, making it dangerously convenient. Now, if you're comparing meal to meal, the carnivore diet does seem more expensive. A juicy, delicious ribeye is going to cost you more than a box of pasta. However, the flaw of looking at it this way is when you are eating these cheap, usually processed foods, you almost never are eating them exclusively. Most standard American diet meals come with many sides along with dessert. With all of those sides, the cost adds up. Not to mention, when you're eating these highly processed carby foods, your glucose and insulin levels rise and then they fall. And you're going to be craving food again, and especially carbohydrates within a couple of hours. So, most people on that kind of a diet are consistently eating throughout the day to keep their hunger pains at bay. Carnivores don't do that. Most carnivores eat 1 or 2 meals a day, and snacking, if it occurs at all, is minimal. For me, I spend less money on the carnivore way of eating than I did on the standard American diet because animal-based carnivore diet foods are extremely satiating. I can eat 1 or 2 meals a day without the need to snack. I no longer spend money on Starbucks and junk food or eating out at restaurants. I used to spend a lot of money on organic fruits and vegetables, but since I exclusively eat meat and meat products, I no longer have those extra food costs, not to mention the money I save on prescription drugs and doctor visits. Quite honestly, the carnivore diet can actually be cheaper than a more mainstream diet. So thank you for watching news you can use from the community, and good night.